Hello everyone and welcome back to Code with Beto. In today's video, we're going to learn how to build an Obscura camera clone using Expo. Let's see the demo. So here I have an iPhone 12 that I'm going to be using to demo this app. This is the iPhone 12 as you can see here, but this iPhone 12 is recording an Android Pixel as you can see here. So this is going to be working for both Android and iOS as you might expect when we are using Expo. We're going to be using React Native Vision Camera. Some of you guys have been asking me to create a video using Vision Camera. Also, if you want to use Expo Camera, which is a very popular library, I have a video in where we created a Snapchat clone if you want to check it out in the channel. We'll leave a link in the description as well if you are curious. But yeah, first of all, guys, I'm super excited for bringing this video. It's a very interesting application that I really liked. And I want to actually show you guys how this app looks in production. So, oops, wrong app. Let me close this one. This is actually the app on the App Store, Obscura. And this application is very popular actually. And it's very nice. It has a really cool black screen UI. And this is what we are trying to achieve, more or less. We're not using the camera. We're going to have as well these kind of controls for zoom and for the exposure of the camera. And yep, so this is our target, this is our expectation, and this is our reality. This is the application that we're going to be building. So we have a couple of functionalities here. For example, if I press on the plus down here, you can see that we have this really cool animation using reanimated to present these buttons that can allow me to play around with the zoom. And let's close that and let's play with the exposure. So this looks really cool if I do this. And yeah, so I can even put +2 and this is how it looks. These values are going to be changing between iOS and Android, and we will learn how to do that as well. So let's close this. So once you are happy with the, let's say the zoom and also the exposure, we're also displaying, as you can see here at the bottom right, the exposure and the zoom that we're using. Then let's take a picture. Once we take a picture, we take the user to this screen with a nice animation. This is actually a modal screen that is displaying the image that I just took. And you can see here the iPhone. This is how it looks. This is the iPhone 12, as I was mentioning before. I can save to gallery or delete and go back. In this case, I will delete. And as you can see, this library is very fast. Vision Camera is a very cool library, honestly, that it's very fast and it's really nice for using the camera. And you know, if you need your application to be very responsive, like this one. Now let's take a picture. Of course, this is the light. I can turn it on and off. Let me put this back to 0 and this back to 1. And let's see if I turn the flash on and let's take a picture. So as you can see there, it's pretty obvious that the flash was on. And I can also take a selfie, as you can see here. Hello. And then let's just take a picture of the Mac, for example, here. And this one, I will save it. So save to gallery. And now I can navigate to the gallery and see my picture here. One more thing that I almost forgot is that we're going to be building as well this beautiful screen for permissions, as you can see here on the Android device. I'm not going to be demoing that, but we're going to be building this UI as well to ask the user for permissions to use the camera, to use the library, the microphone, and cool things like that. All right, so that's the demo. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. And now let's dive into it. As always, guys, all the resources and the source code for this video is going to be available completely for free at codewithbeto.dev. When you go to codewithbeto.dev, make sure that you check our courses. We have a course for React Native, React with TypeScript and Next.js, and Master Git and GitHub. Make sure to check those out. And if you're interested in the code, just go to the project section and you'll find all these projects that we're building in this YouTube channel. And as I was mentioning before, we have here the Snapchat clone with Expo Camera. If you are interested in this one, just go and check this video out. And if you are interested in the code, just come down here. And as well, you will find a project for this video, this one right now, for the Obscura clone, as soon as I release this video. Okay, so you don't see it now, but once this video is out, you should be able to see this project here in the projects. All right, so now that being said, let's start building this application. Alright guys, so the first thing that we're gonna do is just create a new Expo project by running pnpm create Expo App. And by the way, you don't have to use pnpm. I just like to use pnpm, but you can use yarn or npx. Okay, so let's hit enter. And this is going to ask us a couple of questions like, what is my app name? My app name is going to be Obscura clone, and I'll put it like this, hit enter. This will start creating our project. So let's wait a second. All right, so our application is ready. Next thing that I'll do is just cd into my folder. And now I'll clear my terminal. And now that I'm here inside the terminal, I will install a couple of dependencies that we're gonna be using. So let me just copy paste this in here. By the way, I'm gonna leave these dependencies in the project at codewithbeto.dev if you want to go ahead and copy them. By the way, I'm not gonna be using the React Native worklets, so we can just go ahead and remove this. I think this topic is more advanced for the goal of this video. This is more, I would say, beginner friendly, just teaching you how to use Vision Camera. So we're gonna be installing Vision Camera as well as Expo Blur. This is totally optional. I'm using the Expo Blur to display this exposure and zoom in a nice manner, but that is totally optional. Also, we're gonna be using the Expo Media Library to save the photos, okay? So let's go ahead and hit enter to install these dependencies. All right, so the dependencies are installed, but we still need to make some configurations in order to use Vision Camera. So let's go ahead and open this in VS Code. Alrighty guys, so now we are inside VS Code in our newly created project. Now I want to mention a couple things. First of all, we're gonna need a real device to test this because we need access to the camera. We cannot do this in a simulator. The second thing that you need to keep in mind when you are using Vision Camera is that you need to have React Native version 0.73 at least. So you can check that version here. You have to be above 73. In this case, I'm using 74. Just keep that in mind, okay? So here we have Vision Camera and we're using 4.5 in this case. All right, so now that being said, we need to add some configuration in our app.json. All right, and as you can see here, React Native Vision Camera was added, just automatically, but we actually need to specify a couple options in here. So let's go ahead and put this inside an array like this and add these properties. So I'll just paste these properties in here. And by the way, this is totally optional. If you are not gonna be taking videos, that's fine. You don't need to ask permissions for audio. Okay, so let's go ahead and clear that out. This is how the plugin should look like inside your app.json file. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit save. Now, once we have this configuration in place, we can go ahead and pre-build this application. Now, if you are not familiar with pre-build, basically is a command that is going to allow me to create the native projects for iOS and Android that Expo provides. So as you can see here on the left side, we don't have any iOS or Android folder, even though this is a React Native application, right? So let's go ahead and create this by saying npx expo pre-build and hit enter. Okay, this is going to ask me what package do I want to use for my Android app. I'll just go ahead and select the ones that we have by default. So let's go ahead and hit enter. Of course, you can change this if you want. This is going to take a moment because as you can see here on the left, it's creating the Android and iOS folders. These folders are being created based on the specifications that we have in the app.json, based on the specifications that we have in the package.json and all the configurations in our project. Expo creates these native projects automatically for us. Cool. And by the way, a tip for you guys is that if you're gonna be using EAS, which is Expo Application Services, to build this application, you should go ahead and just add to the git ignore these folders so that GitHub will ignore these two folders. So I'll say iOS and Android folder, hit save. And now as you can see here on the left, they are now like gray instead of green, which is good. Now let's go ahead and close the git ignore. And now that we have these two native projects, let's go ahead and compile this application in my device. I'll just go ahead and cd into the iOS folder and open Xcode by saying open Xcode workspace, the Obscura clone workspace, and hit enter. Okay, so the project now it's open on Xcode. I'm not able to make this, a little bit bigger so you can see, but the idea is to select here on the left the Obscura project and then go ahead and sign in capabilities. We need to sign in because we're gonna be testing this in a real device. So I'm going to sign in with my account of Code with Beto. We can go ahead and select the iPhone 12 from the top and just play. So this is going to take a moment. Let's see if this works. Let's go back to the code, and this should be running on the device on the right if this works correctly. But in the meantime, this is going to take like a second or 30 seconds. So in the meantime, I want to start changing some things in my application. First of all, I'm not gonna be using tabs, so I'll just go ahead and delete this folder tabs and just leave this layout. All right, so now we are, selecting the tabs in here, but I'll change this to be an index. And let's go ahead and create this folder. So I'll just right click and say index.tsx and hit enter. Okay, so this index is going to be our only screen, basically. I mean, it's not our only screen, but it's the main screen where we're going to have all these controls, as you can see here on the device. We're going to have permissions, validations, and things like that. So inside this index, let's go ahead and just export default function. I'll name this home screen like that and close. Cool. So let's just return an empty tag for now. I'll just leave this as it is. Yeah, maybe I can have a text, but I want to use this from the theme text that comes with this template. Okay, hit save. And as you can see here on the right, we are able to see the application. Let me go ahead and select allow, and then I have to reload the JS. By the way, I don't think this will work because I haven't started the server. Let me say pm start, or you can say as well npx expo start and hit enter. All right, now let me switch to a development build, because remember that we pre-built this project because this library needs access to the native code. So let's go ahead and switch to development build and reload the JS here by pressing reload. And this should be grabbing from the server that we are running in here, and it's working, as you can see here. All right, and I can see the hello world at the top left, which means this is working fine. All right, so we have our hello world. Now the next thing that I'll do is actually work on an application, sorry, not an application, but a screen to ask for permissions. It's the first thing that we need to do when the user launches the application, because we need access to the library, we need access to the camera so that we can show the home screen, and we need access to the microphone in case you need access to the microphone. So let's go ahead and create a new screen on the left, and I'll call this one permissions. Okay, so let's export the full function, this screen called permissions. And I'll say just screen so that we know what's going on in here with the naming. And let's return for now just an empty tag. I'm going to be importing all as React from React. Let's go ahead and as well import from Vision Camera. I'm going to be using the camera here. So I'll say camera, and also I'm going to be using the camera permissions status. Okay. So the first thing that I want to do is check the permissions, right? So we can do that down here. I'll say camera permissions status, and then set camera permissions status. Let me go ahead and close the Explorer on the left, and let's analyze this a little bit. We're using useState to save this variable, and we are typing this as camera permissions status. which if I just open here double quotes, you can see that we have these four kind of permissions, which is denied, granted, not determined, and restricted. So at the beginning, it's going to be not determined. Let's go ahead and select that one. And now let's create basically the same thing for the permissions of the microphone. So I'll say, let me go ahead and change this with lowercase. Microphone permission status. We're going to be using user state as well. And the status is going to be not determined. Okay. And just to show you guys, we also have the autocomplete because we are typing this like this. All right. So these are the two variables that are going to be holding the state. Now remember that we're going to be using as well permissions for the library, and we installed Expo library for that. So let's go ahead and import all as Expo media library from Expo media library. Okay, now we're going to do basically the same thing. So I'll say const media library permissions, and like that permission status. Let's say media library permission for this one, but this is going to be a bit different because we're going to be using from Expo media library. We have this method called use permissions. So we can use this hook, and this hook is going to return the value. Basically, they are doing this for us. So let's go ahead and return the value, and this is going to return as well a function to request permissions. So I'll name this one request media permissions, media library permissions, like that. And this is a function. The first one is going to be the actual result of the permissions. Inside this return, I'll have a theme view. And this theme view comes with the Expo template. So let's use this one. I'll create some styles as well down here. So I'll say styles equal to style sheet from React Native dot create. Now create a container that will have a flex of 1. And let's go ahead and close this one like that. Cool. Now let me add this to the theme view. And here, style equal to from my styles.container. And inside here, I'm going to be pasting this text. It's just, Obscura needs access to a few permissions in order to work properly. And for the subtitle style, I'm going to say subtitle. I'm going to say subtitle and just text align center. Okay, and hit save. Now, before I go, actually, I'm going to add a padding of 20 in here and hit save. But let's go now to the index screen. And in here, we're going to be checking the permissions. And if the user doesn't have permissions, we're going to send them to the permissions screen. So we can do that using Vision Camera, use camera permissions hook. Now this is similar to what we had with Expo. As you can see, the API is similar as this one, use permissions, but in this case it's for the camera, and this is going to return the has permissions status. Okay, so we're gonna check on based on this variable. Now let's check as well for the microphone permissions. So I'll say microphone permission, and here I'll grab the camera from Vision Camera, and I'll say dot microphone get microphone status. Now we need to redirect to the permissions screen if the user doesn't have permission. So we're going to be using the Expo router. Let's say router equal to use router. So I'll use this hook, use router from Expo router. Now let's create a variable called redirect to permissions. And this variable is going to basically be a Boolean that is going to check if we don't have permissions or the microphone permission is equal to not determined. If one of these is true, then we want to redirect the user. So down here, actually, we can use the redirect component from Expo router, and this is going to take an href. Okay. And as you can see here, we have the permission screen. So let's go ahead and hit save. And now we are redirecting, as you can see on the right. And we have the Obscura needs access to a few permissions in order to work properly. And yeah, that's great. Now, an extra validation, guys. And by the way, I need to say here only if we need to redirect to permissions. Let's go ahead and hit save. And yeah, now down here, I'm going to validate if we don't have a device, we need to just display nothing, right? So I'll say return. And this is for the case if someone is trying to run this application on a simulator. This device is not going to have a camera, so we need to validate that. So to actually use the camera, we can use, let's say device equal to use camera device from React Native Vision Camera. And this use camera device is going to return a device. But we need to specify if we want to have the front camera or the back camera. So in this case, I'll use the back camera, hard coding it like that for now. And then just check if we don't have a device in here, just return an empty tag. Cool. So the validation of the permissions so far should be working because we don't have permissions. We are redirecting the user to the permissions screen. And now we can go to the permissions screen and keep working. All right, so the next thing that I'll do is just add a couple of items here in the UI. So I'm gonna need some styles. And for the styles, I'll just go ahead and paste these styles. I'm just pasting a footnote. It's just styling text. Then we also have a row that is gonna be aligning items from left to right to the center, giving them a gap of 6. Then we also have a spacer. This is useful when you want space between items. So this is going to be like an empty view that is going to be pushing a margin vertical of 8. Okay. Then we also have a permissions container. This is just having a background color, border radius of 10, padding, justify content space between, and you'll see how these styles work in a moment. This is for the text. These are very simple styles. Continue button. So let's go ahead and use these styles up here. All right, so let's hit save. Now the next thing that I want to do is actually use this tag from Expo router dot screen. And we can, if you didn't know, we can access the options in here. And I'll change the header title to be permissions with uppercase. So if I hit save, you can see that on the right, now we have permissions with uppercase, which is good. Now down here, next thing that I want to do is add a view. This view is going to come from React Native, and I'll give it the style of spacer. Okay, and hit save. Now we don't have anything after this view. I'll have and let me move this here to make sure that it's working. As you can see here on the right, we are pushing this text down, which is good. Okay, so let's create a view. And I'll add this style of row. So let's say style dot row. And inside this view, now inside this row, I'm going to add an icon from Iron Icons. And the name for this icon is going to be lock close outline. And close this tag like this. All right, let's give it a color of orange. Hit save. All right, there's the icon. Now for the size of this icon, I'm going to declare a variable of here. And this is going to be of 26. So now down here, I'll say size and then use this variable. Hit save. And that's my lock. I'm importing, by the way, Iron Icons from Expo Vector Icons. And then I'll create a theme text that is going to say required. Hit save. Cool. Now let's add a style here from the styles.footnote. Hit save. There we go. And let's add a new spacer after this view. Hit save. Let's give it a space between spacers. I think this is good. Now let's create a view that is going to contain a switch to ask for permissions. So I'll say view from React Native. This is going to have a style, and this is going to have two styles actually. So let's use stylesheet.compose function to use the styles row as well as the styles.permissions container. And basically what I'm doing here is combining two styles for this view because I want the items from left to right, but I also want to apply the permissions container, which has a background color, border radius, padding, and justify content space between. Now the items that I want inside of this, it's going to be an icon. So let's go ahead and copy this icon and then we can just change the name, paste it here. The name of this one, it's going to be outline and hit save. All right, so that's the camera. And the color for this one is going to be gray. Now I'll add a switch from React Native. And this switch is going to have a track color when true equal to orange. Hit save. And now we need to map a variable to the value of this. And the value is going to be based on the camera permission status. So if this is granted, then this is going to be true. Otherwise, it's going to be false, or the switch is going to be off. And when we change this, we want to call the request camera permissions function. So request camera permissions, we don't have that yet. So let's go ahead and comment this for now and hit save. Now we need a text. So let's add a view in here. Inside this view, I'm going to have a theme text that says camera, and then I can duplicate this and change this to be used for taking photos and videos. This is like a description of why we need permissions, and then just provide a type of subtitle in here. Subtitle, hit save. All right, that's how it looks. Now let me add a style in here. This is going to be the permissions container. Sorry, the permissions text. All right, now that looks good. All right, and this is basically what we need to do for each permission. And also I'll go ahead and call this function request camera permissions. We don't have it yet. We're going to create it in a moment. But what I'll do, guys, it's only copy paste this view a couple more times for the microphone permissions and the library permissions. So let's go ahead and hit save. And of course, this is going to yell at me because I don't have these functions yet. And I'm saving this. So I'll just go ahead and comment this on change, hit save. And now this is working. Okay, cool. This is how it looks. I'm just duplicating this view, right? In this case, this is going to be for microphone, and we are providing a description for why we need access to the microphone. And then we are just adding the switch based on the microphone permissions. If it's granted, then it's going to be true. Otherwise, it's going to be false, or the switch is going to be off. Then the library outline, color gray, basic stuff in here, just, these views in here. Cool. Now we have a spacer at the bottom. We have actually 3 spacers. Let's go ahead and create a button down here using a touchable opacity from React Native. Inside this touchable opacity, I have an arrow to the right so that the user knows that, this button needs to continue once you provide the permissions. Let's add a style. I'll combine again a couple of styles by saying compose, grabbing the row as well as the continue button, and hit save. Now this is at the center of the screen with this nice border. If you want to, just come down here and check the continue button, it's just a padding. We are aligning the item to the center, border radius of 50, and border color white, border width of 2, basic styling again. And yeah, this is how it looks. Now, whenever we press this, we want to handle the continue, but we need to create this function. So let's comment this for now and hit save. And now let's go at the top of this file and let's start creating these functions. So down here, I'll create a function for handling and requesting permissions for the microphone. Now we can say permissions equal to, and for these permissions, we need to await. That's why this is an async function. And I'll use the camera from React Native Vision Camera. Just make sure that you are importing these from Vision Camera. And then we can access this method called request microphone permissions. Okay. Now, based on this result, we are going to set the microphone permission status, passing the permission like that. Okay. And we're going to do the same for the camera permission. So I'll just go ahead and duplicate this function, but instead of accessing the request microphone permissions, we're going to ask the request camera permissions. This is going to set the camera permission status, which is this variable, with the new value based on the result of this function. Okay, now we need also a function to handle the continue, right? So when the user presses the continue button, I want to take them to the home screen or the index file, but at this point, the permissions should be granted. So I need to validate if camera permission status is equal to granted. And also I want to say if the microphone permission status is equal to granted, as well as the media library permissions equal to, actually this is going to be a little bit different, it's just dot granted. If these are true, then I want to use the router dot replace, okay? And I'll replace to the index screen. Otherwise, we can show an alert to the user. So let's import alert from React Native. And let's say, please go to settings and enable permissions. You can customize, of course, this message. But basically, we're going to enter in this else statement if the user does not provide any of these, right? So in this case, I'm saying you have to give me permissions for everything. Otherwise, you don't have access. Maybe in your case, you only need camera permissions and these two are optional. So you don't need to validate for these two, right? But in this case, I just want to make sure that we have access to everything. That's why I will prevent the user to move forward if they don't provide access. Otherwise, I'll just tell them you have to go to settings and provide permissions. Cool. Now let's go ahead and call these functions down here. So let's request permissions camera permissions with this switch and request microphone permissions, as well as request media library permissions. Now in this case, we're calling this function directly. So we have the await as well in here. And this function is coming from the use permissions hook. Okay. So actually, I think I have a typo. Let's request media library permissions. Let's copy this one. And this is just the name that you can provide to this function. So I'll paste this one here. Okay, so I had an S. So yeah, this is how it looks. Now, finally, I need to handle the continue. So let's go ahead and hit save. Let me bring my device and I'll just provide permissions by toggling the first switch. So I'll say allow. Now the switch is orange because this is true. Let's allow for everything, but let's just test that I don't allow for the library. So I'll say don't allow in this case. And if I press continue, I'll see the alert that is telling me, please go to settings and enable permissions. So I'll just say, okay, close these two applications. Let's do the Obscura clone, which is the one that we are working on right now. And I see the hello world. Alrighty guys, now we are able to go directly to the hello world in this case, because we are only redirecting to the permissions if the user has not provided permissions for the camera or the microphone. We don't really need to validate permissions for the library because the user can use the camera still without saving photos. Anyways, once we have this validation, we should be able to always navigate to the hello world, even if I reload the application. So let's go ahead and do that. This is going to reload, navigate, or go straight to the hello world very quickly. We don't even have a navigation animation. It's very quickly going to the hello world. All right, so let's start by adding a view inside of this return. So I'll say view from React Native and just wrap this text. I'll also create some styles. So let's go down here and say const styles equal to style sheet from React Native dot create. I'll have a container style, and we will have a flex of 1 so that we take the entire screen space, and then I'll have a padding top. Now I'll validate the platform in here because this behavior is different for Android and iOS. So let's check if the platform OS is equal to Android. Then I want to have the status bar, and keep in mind that I'm importing this from React Native, and I can say the current height. So this is the height of the status bar, and this is the padding that I want to have in my container for Android, and for iOS, I'll just have 0. The reason why I have 0 on iOS is because instead of actually using this view, I'm gonna be using a safe area view from React Native. Let's wrap this in here again, and let's add the styling here. So say styles container, hit save, and we should be able to, oops. Yeah, I need a parenthesis in here. We should be able to see the hello world in the safe area view. Okay, cool. Now, the first thing that I want to do is display my camera. So after this hello world, I just delete this text for now and render the camera component. Now, this camera component is going to take some properties. The first one is going to be a style of 1 because I want this to take the entire screen space. And it also takes a device. So let's pass the device as well as is active equal to true. So let's hit save, and we should be able to see the camera in there. Let me flip the phone. Let's just leave it there. I think that should be fine. Yeah, so I don't have like a lot to show you guys, so that view should be enough. Now, these are the, I would say, 3 properties that we need to have the camera functioning. But a couple things to notice is that the camera is taking the entire screen, and that's not ideal. That's not the UI we want. So let's go ahead and take 2/3 of the screen for the camera and 1/3 of the screen for the controls. What I'll do for that is wrap this in a view from React Native, and then also create a new view down here. And let's create, well, I'll do inline styles. I think it's easier to see. So what I'll do is that I'll add a style for this one, and I'll say flex of 1, and down here I'll say flex of 1 as well. So what I'm doing here, I'll add a background color. Let's say gray. What I'm doing here is basically taking 50% of the screen, because remember that the container has a flex of 1, which means it's going to take the entire screen, right? But inside this container, we have 2 flex of 1, which means each flex is going to take 50% of the screen. But if I change this to be 2, that means that this view is going to take 2/3 of the screen, and this, because only has flex of 1, it's going to push for 1/3 of the screen. So let's go ahead and hit save. And now the screen is taking 2/3 of the screen with this very clean style. Let's go ahead and remove this background color. We don't need it anymore. It was just to show you guys. And yeah, that's how it looks. Now, the camera has a border radius. So let's say border radius of 10, hit save. And this will not apply unless you have an overflow hidden. And now we have this really cool border radius. All right, so let's start working on the controls. Inside of this view, I'll have this comment for the top section of the controls. Now this top section is going to have a view in here, and we're going to have a theme text, or actually, yeah, it will be a theme text that will have a max FPS. And this is a really good time to show you guys all the information that we can get for the camera from this library. So I can say device.format, add position 0, and then say max FPS. well, you can just press dot and see everything you have, like photo width, video height, everything you need. But I'll just show here the max FPS, just so that we know. In this case, it's 60, which is pretty decent for this iPhone. Then let's go ahead and duplicate this, and I'll say, let's say just for information width, and we can access the formats at position 0, and then say photo width. We can do the same thing for the height. So I'll do that in here, height of, and then we can just say again, device.formats at position 0, photo, in this case, height. All right, and that's how it looks. We can also display the camera name. So let's create a new text and say camera, and access just device. If we just access device, we have a lot of information. So I'll just say name. And we have very useful information. For example, the min zoom or the max zoom as well. In this case, you can see that this is available, example 128, right? And this is going to depend on the device, and which is good to know is that for this specific device, we can check what's the maximum and based on that validate, right? We can also check, for example, has torch, has flash, and we're gonna use a couple of these in a moment. So let's just display the name for now. As you can see here, it's the back camera, but if I come here and change this to be front, hit save, you can see that now the camera says front camera. Let's change this to be back so that we can see something. And yeah, this is how it looks so far. Now, what I'll do, guys, is I will apply the same concept inside of this flex. I have a third of the screen, but this third of the screen, I want to divide it into sections. This is going to be the top section, and I want this to take only flex of 0.7. So you can also do that if you didn't know. And now let's create a new section down here. I'll copy the same view, and I'll name this one bottom controls or bottom section, and put it like that. Hit save. Let's just put a background color just to show you guys how much of the screen this is taking. Okay, so let's remove that. Now, inside of this view, I want to have buttons, but these buttons, I'm gonna be reusing these buttons a lot in these controls. So what we can do is create a component for this button. So I'll say Obscura component. Actually, Obscura button is a better name, .tsx. And export default function, Obscura, button. Now this button, guys, actually, I don't want to spend too much time working on it. I'll just go ahead and paste this component that I already have in here, and I'll go ahead and explain it to you. So in this case, we are importing some colors, and these colors come with the template. So if I say colors, you can see that we can import these from the constant. And if I click in these colors, this is going to take me to the colors that come with this template. So I'm going to be using those just for utilizing stuff, an icon, and then some stuff from React Native like style props, style sheet, text, touchable opacity. And I'm going to be passing props to this button because I want this button to be dynamic, right? I want to reutilize this button with different icon, with different name, and maybe with not a title, maybe just with an icon. So I'm specifying the properties here called Obscura button props. We're going to have an action when the user presses the button. We're going to have a title, which is optional. That's why I'm having this question mark. Then we also have an icon name, container style, and icon size. Now the icon name, it's being typed so that when we type the name, it's gonna be typed based on the ion icons that we are using from Expo Vector icons, okay? And then the container style, it's going to be applied to the touchable opacity down here. So the type of this is going to be a view style. And then we have an icon size of type number. Then we are passing these as properties to the component, typing it like that. And this is going to be just a touchable opacity. We are passing the onPress from the prop, the style container, and then I'm just validating based on a couple of things. For example, if we have a title, I'll have this value, otherwise I'll have 40. We're using the dark background. And on top of that, we are passing the container style. Now, this is a way of combining styles as well, passing them inside an array. Or we can also use the stylesheet.compose function that we saw previously. All right, then we are validating. If we have an icon name, we are rendering an icon. If we have a title, we are rendering a title. Okay, in this case, it's going to be a text. Just with a font size of 40, font weight, and color white. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit save. This is the container style, by the way. Just adding a padding, flex direction row, align item center, gap 7, border radius of 40, and that's it. It's honestly a very simple button component. It's just a touchable opacity that I'm going to be utilizing. So let's go ahead and come back to the bottom part and let's start utilizing this component. I'll say Obscura button, importing this from the component, and we need to pass some properties like the icon name, right? So this one is going to be flashlight, okay? And then we also need to pass an onPress, so I'll just pass an empty function. And as you can see here on the right, we're able to see this icon that I can press and nothing is going to happen, okay? Because we don't have an action, but you can see here how am I pressing it and how it looks. Cool. So we're going to have a lot of buttons in this case that are going to be in charge of showing the tools like the torch, like the flashlight. So in order to keep like the state of these variables, I'll go ahead and create some variables up here. We're going to be holding the state of the zoom, the exposure, the flash, the torch, the some of the zoom controls. So for those, I'll go ahead and copy some of them in here after device. And let me just go ahead and go to the top and say import all as React from React. Okay. And down here, I'm going to be using these variables using state. So these are like the tools, right? The zoom, the exposure, the flash, the torch. And keep in mind that the zoom is going to be based on the device neutral zoom, which is a property that we can access from the device in here. And this is going to be like the initial zoom of the camera. Okay, cool. So based on that, we can render our buttons and also change these variables, but also we can map these variables into the camera state. So let's put this here, and I'll start by adding the zoom from my variables. Then we can say is active, is always going to be true. Then we can pass something like resize mode, and resize mode can be contain or cover. By the way, in this case, I want it to be cover. So this is how it looks. This is the default, by the way, but it's good to know that we can say contain. And in this case, this is going to like push, right, the entire view of the camera. You can play around with this, but in this case, I'll just use the cover like this and hit save, so that we cover the view that we are interested to see, right? Cool. Then we can say exposure, passing the exposure variable, as well as the torch, passing the torch. And then I think that's all, right? We have the torch. Oh, we're missing the flash. The flash actually is not a property that we can add to the camera, but actually like a variable that we're going to pass before we take the picture. So we're still gonna need the flash in a moment. We're gonna use it. And now that we have all these state variables, we can start playing around with them in here. So this Obscura button can start looking something like this. The icon name is going to be flashlight or flashlight outline based on the torch on or torch off. Now, each time that we press this, we're going to start toggling the torch. So what I'm doing here is accessing the previous state and then validating. If the previous state is off, then I want to put it on. Otherwise, I want to say off. It was on, right? Basically just toggling. And if I go and check my device and start pressing this, you can see that this is working. Let me press it again and again. And if you're not able to see, let me put my hand. This is very easy to see actually. I'm just toggling it and it's working fine. All right, so let's leave it like that. And let's start adding more buttons like that. Okay, so I don't want to waste too much of your time, guys. I'll go ahead and paste these buttons and let's go through them one by one. The second one, it's a flash, right? This is going to be the exact same thing as a torch. The difference is that the torch is going to work as a lamp or as a flashlight, and the flash is a variable that we're going to be using to pass to the camera before we take the picture to tell the camera whether or not use the flash on the picture, okay? And we're just toggling this value as well. Then the camera position, this is going to be to flip the camera. So let's go ahead and create this variable. I'll go up here. Let's go to the variables. And after the torch, we can have the camera position. All right. And the camera position is going to, and actually this camera position, guys, is going to be by default back, but we can pass it before. If we declare this before the device, we can just map this camera position in here. Instead of having the hard-coded back, we can say camera position and hit save in a moment once we finish. But basically what I'm doing here is just setting the camera position between back and front based on this icon, okay? And the icon name is camera reverse outline, okay? And then we have this image outline. So this is an interesting one. This button is going to allow the user to open the media library application or like the photos application for Android and iOS. But we need to redirect the user. And in this case, we're gonna be using linking. This is a like a module that comes from React Native with a function called OpenURL, which is very useful to link the user to specific applications. So for iOS, it's called Photos Redirect, and for Android, it's called Content Media External Images Media. So if I hit save and then grab my device in here and try to press the library icon, you can see that it's taking me to the to the Photos app. All right, so that's working fine. Cool. Now these icons, as you can see here, they are all in one place. Yeah, let's call this one, instead of bottom, I'll call this one middle, and then say legs direction row, and say, well, let's hit save, and then justify content space evenly. Cool. Yeah, just like that. So we don't need like a super complex, styles, right? Just by having these very simple styles, we can have a beautiful UI. All right, so let's go ahead and minimize this. We know that this is working. We already mapped these variables, so let's use the selfie one. It's working, as you can see me there. And then we can navigate. All right, the last one actually is going to be this one, which is going to take me to this screen with no purposes for now, because this is out of the scope of this video. But if you want to have some sort of settings screen, you can do so. And yeah, so let's turn on the flash Well, we're not handling taking picture right now, so let's just leave it off. Yeah, let's continue. All right, so now what I want to do is work on the controls for the zoom and the exposure of the camera. So to display the user the values that we are handling, I'm gonna put this after this view. So I'll create a blur view. And remember guys, we installed blur view from Expo, and you can verify that this is coming from Expo up here. As you can see there, Expo Blur. Expo Blur is going to take an intensity. I'm just using 100 and the tint dark, and just adding a style. In this case, it's going to be absolute because I want to position this at the bottom right of the camera, like around here where my mouse is, and just adding some padding. Then I'm passing this experimental blur method. This is for Android. As you can see here, blur method to use on Android because this blur view, it's actually experimental on Android, and in order for this blur to work correctly, we need to pass this property like that. And then I'll just pass a text. This text can be actually a theme text. So let me change this in here and remove this style. Hit save. And there we have it. So this is a blur view, as you can see here. And if I move the device, we can see a little bit the background. And you can play around with this tint. For example, if you want something more light, you can do so. And this is how it looks. Okay. Now in this case, because we are using, like dark stuff, if you just type dark, you're going to have like system thin material dark, which I think it looks good as well. It's more like you can see between it, through it. And yeah, so this is good because at this point we're using just a text to display the exposure and the zoom. And now the user knows what is like the zoom that he's using or the exposure. All right, so now I'll go ahead and create my last section. So I'll position myself in here and say bottom. This is going to be like the bottom section. In this section, I'm going to provide the controls for the zoom, as well as the exposure, as well as the button to take the picture. So let's create a view and let's give it a style. So I'll say style, background color, let's say green, hit save. All right, we don't have anything because we don't have a flex, right? So in this case, this section, I wanted to take a little more screen. So I'll say 1.1 and hit save. And this is going to be my bottom section. Okay, it looks good. Yep, and we can see it there. It's green. So let's add the let's add a touchable highlight from React Native, as well as a font awesome icon, which is going to be a dot circle, and then it's going to take a take picture function, which is a function that we haven't created yet. So I won't save this for now, or maybe yes, I can do that by just saving it like this. As you can see there, this is the button, that's how it looks. Now what I'll do now, it's apart from this, I want to save flex direction row because I'm going to have more items. So let's hit save. Then I want to say justify content space evenly as well. So let's hit save. This is actually going to center the item and align items to the center and hit save. Cool. Now I'll just go ahead and remove the color green and just leave it black. That's how it looks. Now let's work on the take picture before we dive into the zoom and all that stuff. So I'll say on press, take picture. All right, so now let's go ahead and copy this. Let's go at the top of our file and let's create this function. So const take picture, it's going to be an async function. This is going to be an arrow function, and we are going to try to take a picture. So something can go wrong, right? So it's a good practice to have a try catch in here. And for now, I'll just put it in the console. console log the error, but it's a good idea to have an alert and specifically tell the user what went wrong by accessing the message of the error or displaying something related. It also is a good practice to have some validations in here. So for example, I can say if camera, and by the way, we don't have a camera, which brings me to, we need to somehow tell the camera component down here that we need to take a picture, right? So the way we can do things like that is by adding a reference to this camera. So let's go ahead and say const camera equal to useRef from React. And this is going to be equal to null at the beginning. And I'll say that this is going to be of type camera. And then we can use this to reference the camera by saying ref equal to camera. Okay. Now with this reference, we can take the picture, but I can also say camera.current. If this is equal to null, then I want to throw an error. So I'll say throw new error, passing the message like camera ref is null. And what this is going to do is actually, if we hit this line, this error, it's going to trigger the catch with this error message, and we can put in the console so that we know what went wrong. In this case, we can say something like, we don't have a camera. Camera ref is null. Or something, more custom, whatever you need. If we do pass this line, we can say something like console log taking a picture, right? So that we know we are taking a picture. Then we can grab the photo by saying await, and then using the camera reference. So I'll say current.takePhoto. All right, this take photo function takes some options, and these options are going to be an object, and you can say things like flash, and this is a great point to map or flash in here. So I'll pass the flash variable. You can also have things like enable auto distortion correction or enable auto red eye reduction, or whatever you guys need. You can just put here equal to false or equal to true. And you can see all the options by checking this photo file. Sorry, by checking this take photo options method. So we can actually do that by coming here and say take photo options, and then just click on this, and you can see that we have the flash, which is the first one, the one that I'm using. We have path, and you also have a description, which is really great. So this must be a directory, as Vision Camera will generate a unique file name itself. Then we have these options, and you can keep scrolling down, but I think these are all the options. Some of them are for iOS only, as you can see here. But yeah, this is a good way to know all the options that we can pass to the camera. Okay, we are taking the photo, we are saving it, and then what should we do with this photo? Well, we need to show this photo to the user, but I don't want to keep adding more stuff into this screen because we already have a bunch of stuff. So I want to take this photo and send the user to a different screen where they can see the picture. So I'll use the router again. I'll say router.push, and I'm going to push this path name. It's going to be media, which is a screen that I haven't created yet. But then I also want to pass some parameters. The first one is going to be the media, which is the photo.path. This is like the address in the device where the picture is going to be saved. And then the type. The type of this is going to be photo. And this type, guys, it's actually just a variable that I'm using to tell the screen media that I'm passing a photo, because we can also record a video, right? So for example, we can have something like video equal to await camera.current.take record. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, and actually I don't have the video capability in here. Yeah, we need to come down here and say video enables video capture with start recording. So I'll just say, yes, I'm gonna be using video. I think we can do the same for photo, but I think photo by default is true. So let's go down here. Sorry, let's go up here where was I? Yeah, so we can do something similar to this by saying current dot, yeah, start recording. Okay. So when you start recording, and actually this takes some properties, I think. Yeah, you can also pass record video options, as you can see here. And on recording finish and on recording error, this is going to return the like the video, and then you can handle whatever you need to do with the video, like for example passing the path name as well. And in this case you would say this is a video, so that when we are in that screen we can render the video instead of rendering a picture. Okay, so for now this is out of the scope of this video. I don't want to make these videos too complicated, but this gives you a really good idea of how to take a video. Basically it's the same thing, but instead of photo, a video. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this media screen so that Expo router stops yelling at us. TSX, hit save, and let's go back, and now we don't see this error anymore, which is good. And yeah, let's close this. All right, so now that being said, this is all we need for taking the picture. So once we take the picture, we're going to navigate to the media screen, display the photo, but we're going to validate this in a moment. So let's go ahead and hit save. Now the warning goes away, and we can scroll down and our bottom is finished. Now let's leave the media screen at the end. What I want to do now is add the left and right buttons that are going to be down here. And these buttons are going to render the, like with using reanimated, where they're going to render the, how can I explain this? They are going to render if we go back to the App Store. So in this case, we're trying to do something similar like this. So we're going to render these buttons in this order. So every time that we press these buttons, instead of doing an action, well, we're going to be doing an action, but the action is going to be showing these buttons like 0.5, 0.1, 2, 3 for the zoom, as well as the exposure. So yeah, let's do that. Let's go back to the app. Just put this in here and let's create these buttons. Now I need some state so that I can validate when I can render the buttons, and I'll create these two state variables for show the zoom controls and show the exposure controls. This is just a boolean that is going to be false or true, and we're going to be toggling this, and based on this we're going to render the component that is actually going to do this, change the zoom and change the exposure. Okay, so we have the zoom and exposure, and we're going to change them based on the controls. So let's go now down here. Before this touchable opacity, I will add this Obscura button, and this button is going to be a plus and minus sign. And on the other side, let me paste this button as well, which is going to have a title of X1, and this is going to be in charge of the exposure. Now notice that we are just toggling these booleans, so we're setting this to true or false, whatever the previous value was. So let's go ahead and hit save. And as you can see here, we have these buttons that are not doing anything so far. So let's go ahead and create the components that we need. Let's go ahead and create a new component. And this component is going to be called zoom controls.tsx. All right, so this is going to be a very interesting component. And by the way, you need to have reanimated installed because we're going to be using it. React Native reanimated, as you can see here. If you don't know if you have it installed, you can just search for reanimated in your package.json. The Expo template comes with reanimated, which is great. I don't have to install it. It's already there. and I can just go ahead and import it and use it. I'm going to be using animated and bounce in, and you're going to learn more about this in a moment. Then I'm importing as well some stuff from React Native, like a text, touchable opacity, use window dimensions, and view. And then and then a touchable opacity from React Native gesture handler. Now, then I'm also defining a couple of variables that you can play around, like the min zoom, the max zoom, and then neutral zoom and zoom options. Okay, this is an array of values, and we're gonna be using those in a moment. Next thing that I want to do is just define my component. This is my component, zoom controls, and I'm gonna be passing the set zoom, set show zoom controls, and the actual zoom value, because we need to know which is the current value so that we can set the next value, right? Cool. Now I'm just typing this as this. Now I'm just typing these properties, as you can see there. The set show zoom controls is going to be a function that is going to take the show boolean. The zoom is going to take the zoom number, and it's going to return void. Now, of course, guys, there might be a better way to integrate this, and also, maybe you can play around with the values, and this is not the best solution, but it will work. So let me just add a return in there, and I'll have a width and height because we want to display the buttons like in the clock way to the right, like 12, 1, 2, and 3, something similar like that. So we need to have the radius, okay? For the radius of the screen, we need to use the width and or height, the minimum of those. So I'm just playing around with these values, and I just subtracted 100 from the height, and then we're multiplying these for 0.35. We can adjust this depending on the type of circle that you are trying to draw with the buttons. Now, when the user presses the button, we actually want to just call this function, which is going to handle the zoom press. We're going to pass the zoom factor, and then we are going to validate if the zoom is equal to -1, then we want to set to the neutral zoom, which is going to be this variable that we define in here, which is 1. And then otherwise we need to calculate the new zoom. And then this is going to be calculated as follows, based on the minimum zoom or the max zoom. We're grabbing the minimum of those and then set the zoom. Okay, zoom factor, zoom, min zoom, and max zoom. So basically we are just checking that we are inside of this range between 1 and 121 and 128, sorry. Cool. This is the function, so we don't need to do anything else for that, just call it. Now let's create a view for this. Inside this view, we're going to have these controls. So this is actually very cool. The first thing that I want to do here is just iterate over the zoom option. So I'm gonna say map, this is an array. So I'll grab the zoom option and the index, and we are going to return an animated view. So I'll say animated.view. This is the view that we're returning, and we're going to return this view z times. So this is coming from here. In this case, we only have 5 buttons. So we are iterating, and we are going to render 5 buttons. Now, we need to calculate some stuff in here. I'll just go ahead and paste this. We need an angle, and this is going to be changing depending on the index, okay? Because the first one I want it at 12. The second one I want it at 1, 2, and 3. So we need to do that by multiplying by the index. Sorry, we start by getting the angle, which is going to be the index divided by the length of the array divided by 3. And actually I was playing around with these values. You can switch them, multiplying this by 2 and then by p minus 2. This is going to be basically the start point, which is 12 o'clock. And these values were given to me by ChatGPT. I'm not really sure what are they doing, but they are working. Then we also need the position X and Y of each button, and we're getting those with the cos and sin of this angle, okay? Then multiplying by the radius and just playing around with these values, plus 40 and then plus height divided by 4. Cool. So now we are iterating over each item. So let's provide a key in here. This is going to be the index. And the cool thing about using reanimated is that we can have an entering animation. So I'll say bounce in, which can also have a delay of I multiplied by 100. This is cool because it's going to show each one of them with a delay based on the index, and it's going to appear like dun 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 dun. Not all of these controls at the same time, but we're going to be waiting a little bit. And then we need a style. The style is going to be position absolute, right? Because we want to position this in a manner that is going to be like a clock. So we need to specify the left position equal to X and the top position equal to Y. So I'll say top equal to Y. And then we need the content, which is going to be just a touchable highlights. Go ahead and paste it in here. We are going to call the handle zoom press whenever we press this button, passing the current zoom, the current value of this component that we're iterating in here. And then just adding a style and also a text that is going to let me know which value I'm pressing, right? So let's go ahead and hit save. These are the controls. That's all we need. Let's go ahead and go back to the index and we need to display these values. Okay, so let's go to the index and I'll scroll up. I'm going to minimize this. So one more thing to keep in mind is that we don't want to show this entire section, this entire view down here when we have the controls enabled. Well, you can show them if you want to, like having an overlay, but in this case, I don't want to show them. So I'll have a validation based on the show zoom controls. If this is true, then I want to render the zoom controls and I'm going to be passing the set zoom function, the set show controls, as well as the zoom. If we don't have a zoom, I'll just default these to be 1. All right. Otherwise, for now, I just have a null value. Okay. So let's see what happens if I press the plus. All right, it breaks because native gesture handler must be used as a descendant of gesture handler root view. All right, so let's go to the layouts and let's just add this component, gesture handler root view, and wrap this in here. Hit save. Now let's try again. I'll press this and we have them. Cool. But I just broke my UI. Let me shake my device and reload. Yeah, so the UI just broke because the way that I want to use it is instead of rendering null, I want to render the entire view that we had before. So this means that when I have the zoom controls enabled, I won't be viewing these controls. Okay, so let's do that again. I press this and everything goes away and I can play around with the zoom. Cool. Now let me go back. Let me reload. I just realized that we don't have like a plus button. So let's go back to the zoom controls. And after this, after this array, after iterating over the array of buttons, I'll just have a touchable opacity, which is a button that is positioned kind of in the middle or at the center of this circle. So yeah, let's go ahead and hit save. This is going to just set the zoom controls equal to false. And let's do that again. Let's press this button and the button is there. I can close the controls and we are bringing back everything. Now keep in mind that because we are showing this delay, bounce delay of 100, we have this really cool animation when I press the plus, right? So if I just go ahead and comment this line and show the buttons, they are showing very ugly. Okay, I mean very statically, which is not super cool. But if I just add this simple line, because I'm using reanimated, I have this beautiful animation, and we can play around with these values. As you can see here, it's working fine. I can do zoom up to 5 and then come back to 1. And yeah, so you can play around with these values. You can change these values if you want by coming to these zoom options. But yeah, let's go back. And actually, you can set the zoom and just close it, and the zoom is going to remain. As you can see here on the screen, zoom is equal to 3. And then I can go back and set it to 1, go back. Okay, cool. Now, we need to do the same thing, guys, but in this case, it's going to be for the exposure. So this is going to be very similar. Let's go here and create a new file. This one is going to be exposure controls.tsx. This is going to be extremely similar, guys. So in this case, I'll go ahead and copy paste this component. Let me walk you through it. The difference in the exposure one is that the values are going to change between Android and iOS. So that's why I'm having here two arrays. I want to use one array for iOS and I want to use the other one for Android. And you can see how they work in a moment. Or maybe you can just run it on an Android. In this case, we're using these values for iOS, which is a simulator that I'm using. I mean, it's not a simulator, it's my real device. But yeah, so there we have them. These are the values that we're gonna be iterating. And now keep in mind that I'm just saving one of them in this variable based on the platform. Okay, cool. Now I'm having the same animation from Reanimated, so nothing different. Passing the same properties, set exposure, set show exposure, and the current exposure. Okay, typing this the same manner as we had it before, getting the radius as we had it before. Let's actually put this side by side so that we can see the difference. This is the zoom. Let me scroll a bit up. So far, until line 27, nothing has changed. The handle exposure is just going to set the exposure. We don't need to care about the range between 1 and the maximum zoom. And then we can keep scrolling down. Now the difference here, guys, is that in this case I'm playing around with difference position, right? So in this case, instead of adding 40, I'm subtracting 90, right? And the other difference, I think, is that yeah, I think that's the only difference. So yeah, the only difference is that for X, we are subtracting from the width, okay? And in this case, we're just getting like the angle. So yeah, we are subtracting from the width minus the cos, which effectively is going to position this at the right, but coming instead of starting the clock at 12 and going to 3, it's going to start at 12 and it's going to go to 11, 10, 9, 8. All right, it's going to be backwards. Now, the logic is very similar. If we scroll side by side, we are just passing X and Y similarly as here. And the controls are going to be pretty much the same thing. We can actually, I think, subtract this into a component and then just pass as property which side you want to render this component. But so far, I think this is great. And here I have a text that is rendering the exposure. If it's greater than 0, we're going to have a plus, otherwise just the exposure, because it can also be a negative number. So keep that in mind. And finally, if we close it, it's going to stop showing these exposure controls. So let's go ahead and go back to this screen. And what I want to do now is have a validation, an extra validation in the middle of these two. So let's add this validation in here like that. But in this case, I want to say if the show exposure controls it's equal to true, then I want to render the exposure controls, which is this component. Now this component takes some properties like set exposure, and we have a variable already for that. And then set show exposure controls, set show exposure controls, and finally the exposure value. Hit save. Cool, let's see if this works. Let's grab my phone and press this button. And cool, this works just fine. And we can play around with these values. Remember that I'm mapping this exposure to the camera. Okay, and you can play with these values, guys, by moving around between these. This is like super bright, very dark, which is cool, looks nice. Maybe -1 looks really cool if I turn on the Android. Yeah, so here we have, let's go ahead and allow everything on Android. Maybe this is a good time to show you how this looks on an Android. So hopefully you can see there. Let's quickly go and allow everything while using the app. Yes, and allow this one as well. Let's go to the app. This is how it looks on Android. Of course, it's not connected to the Metro server, which is fine, but the animation works as expected. Oops, I think I wasn't recording correctly, but the animation is working as expected. Oops, minimize. Yeah, and we can play with these values. As you can see here in Android, you see the 10, 5, and +10. And on iOS, which is my device that I have here, we have 2 and -2, which is different. Let's put this to 0 again. Let's close this. Let me close this here. On the left is going to work as expected as well, as you can see there. Because I'm not connected, and that's fine. But yeah, everything else works fine. Even if I go to the library, it's taking me to the library, and we can go back to the app. We can turn on the flash, the light, everything works just fine. And yeah, that's Android. Let me take this out of the way and maybe block it for now. Yeah, let's put this back here. And by the way, I was forgetting taking the picture. We need to actually take the picture. Let me go ahead and take a picture here. So as you can see, it's taking the picture and it's going to the oops screen because we haven't integrated the media screen. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's see how the media is going to look. I'm going to start by importing my button, theme view, text, and some other stuff from Expo router like use router, use local search params. Because remember that when we navigate after taking the photo, we are passing some params, right? We're passing the media and the type. In this case, it's hard-coded to be photo. So we're going to grab this type from the use local search params. And once we have this, we can just render a, so I'll say return, we can render a theme view. But actually I was working on these guys. Let me copy this in here and I'll create some styles down here and we can analyze this in a moment. But for now, let me just go ahead and save. I'll show you exactly how this works in a moment, but this is a very simple UI. If I take a picture, we are navigating to the media screen, as you can see there, and I can go back and take another picture. And this is actually fast, right? As soon as I press the button, we are navigating. And then we can play around with the exposure. Let's put it very dark, like -1. I think that looks cool. And then let's add a zoom of 2 and maybe go back and change this to be -2 so that we have this really cool dark, and press the picture. And this is taking me. So this is how it looks, the media. And what is happening under the hood, let me open the terminal in here. What is happening is that we are taking the picture and then let me open this so we can see a bit better. And then we're navigating, right? So let's analyze this in slow motion. Let's go to the index. As soon as I take the picture, I push the media to the media screen, and then I put in the console the media type, right? Media type is always going to be photo, as you can see down here, and this is the file path. And this file path that I'm getting from the media that I'm getting as well from the route, from the router params, this is how we are grabbing this value using this hook. But then once I have this media, I'm just passing this to the image. But now keep in mind that I had this validation here to show you how you can handle video. If you validate based on type, if the type is photo, then you render an image. Otherwise, you would render a video instead of null, right? And the video, this would look something like this. You will need to pass the media as well and some styles for the video. And finally, we have the button to save to gallery, which is very easy to use. I really like this from Expo that, we have these really cool modules like save to library. It's a simple function that we are importing from Expo Media Library. And that's it. Now, if you want to customize this screen, like for example, as you can see here in my device, it's a stack screen, right? So when I take the picture, it's navigating, sliding from right. But if we go to the layout and just duplicate this and change the name to be media, hit save, we can add some options like the presentation. Give me 1 second, presentation, modal, hit save. And now as you can see, we have this really cool modal view. Let me go ahead and get rid of my zoom and my exposure. Let me take a picture there. And now we're navigating from the bottom, which is really nice. We can swipe and you can see that we have still the camera active under this screen and it's working fine. Okay, cool. So yeah, I took a picture there. Let me save it to the gallery. Save to gallery. And now if I press the button, it's going to take me to the gallery where I can view my picture. As you can see, good quality. I can crop and do all the kind of stuff that you can do in your library. But yeah, if I come back, we should be able to reload the app and see the camera. All right, let's turn on the flash in this case and take a picture. And as you can see, that comes with flash. Hopefully you can see it in the video, but yeah, that's how it works. But yeah, super easy to integrate this media library, guys. As I was saying, if you want to integrate the video, shouldn't be too hard. And actually, there's a really nice library right now, a new library from Expo Video. Let me go ahead and show you guys. Expo Video, it's a new library that it's actually in experimental mode, but you can use it for your videos if you want to. It's very easy to use. You just need to install it, and then you can see the very simple example here in the Expo docs. But yeah, that's out of the scope of this tutorial, but I hope you really like this video, guys. I hope you learned something new. I think this is a really strong video, finally showing you how to use the React Native Vision Camera. You can do more advanced stuff with this camera, with this library. But what I was saying, this is going to work great on Android, as you can see there, as we saw previously. But yeah, remember guys, that if you want to get access to the code, just go to colbybeto.dev and check out the projects. I'm going to leave the link down here. Just come here, click the project that you need and scroll down. You'll find the dependencies that we used. You can download the link. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to check out the courses here. Don't forget to give it a like. And yeah, I hope you like it. I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.